of the L2 5-day construction series. Thank you for joining us here today, and I hope everyone is safe and healthy during this period. Let me introduce myself. I'm Trisha Shiu, and I'm currently working with Raja Darrell and Low, a legal firm that also practices in the construction industry. I was informed that the original L2 host, Mr. Lam Wai Lun and Mr. Leong Hong Kit, is on the beach somewhere enjoying their coconuts, and therefore I was given this opportunity to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Naseem Ameer Ali, whom I believe need no further introduction from me. So without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Naseem to start his presentation today.
Thanks, Trisha. Can you just check and confirm that you can hear me nice and clear?
Yes, I can hear you clear.
Okay, good. And the second thing before you disappear is for me to make sure that I can pin right. Okay. Right. Thanks, Trisha. Well, it's good to know that Trisha is a lawyer who is hosting it today. I'm always a little, not say comfortable, but I like it when there are more lawyers in the audience because I want their feedback. I really value their feedback because a lot of it is drafting and so on. Okay, right. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of the day it is in whichever part of the world you are. In the UK, it's 8 a.m. In New Zealand, here it's 7 p.m. and everything else in between, of course, in Kuala Lumpur at 3 p.m. Now, greetings in New Zealand is kia ora, good day, which is more Australian, really. Good morning, afternoon, salams, and Ramadan Mubarak, because a fair number of you would be fasting. So, selamat berpuasa. Now, as always, because in New Zealand, we are always conscious of emergencies and anything that could happen, earthquake and so on, although there's no earthquake in Auckland. They're volcanoes, but most of them are sort of dead, technically. Now, so health safety, if in an emergency, you have to know for yourself where you are supposed to run. Don't run, walk briskly. So grab whatever it is that you can grab. In my case, it will be this bag here, which is an emergency bag. And inside that bag, there's a packet of milk. There is Whittaker's chocolate. You can see that? Yep, Whittaker's chocolate, which is internationally famous in New Zealand. And of course, this thing which I can actually just turn it, no batteries required, and then I can turn it on, and I got a radio, and so on. Okay, so those are some of the emergency kits, which I will be then going out straight through the door on my right here. I know you can see this left, that doesn't matter. I know which way I'm going. Down, shout, make sure everyone else in the household, my kids and all that are with me. Run down the stairs, no, not run down, walk slowly down the stairs, no, walk briskly down the stairs, out through the door, down the shared driveway, onto the road, and then what do? Well, you can eat your chocolate. Anyway, so that's it. Now, and a reminder again, we're in a COVID-19 situation, although in some countries we're starting to open up and so on. That's all good. But the drill is, don't touch your face is sacred. Don't touch your eyes, don't touch your nose, don't touch your mouth unless it's clean. Keep your hands clean throughout the day. And remember, physical distancing, not social distancing. Feel free to talk to people over Zoom and everything else. So physical distancing, not social distancing. Just a recap. This whole 5-day series is about forming the contract, which we did with on Monday when we looked at formation of contract, drafting contracts and so on. And then over Tuesday, Wednesday, and today, we're talking about performing the contract. We talked about time clauses on Tuesday. Yesterday, we talked about all the money clauses. And then we're continuing today with the health safety, subcontracting, as well as termination clauses. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about dispute resolution, or what we call storming, as well as some ideas for reforms and norming. What happened post-2030 once we have smart contracts and so on. Just a reminder, which we have to keep repeating. This is my vision. So I have to keep drilling to myself and always remembering, whatever I do, is it working towards vision 2030 or not? If it is not, how important it is. Now, the Vision 2030 is basically every construction contract in the world smart or otherwise, has a structure, a logical structure, organized in way like all the time clauses together, money clauses together, quality clauses together, any language, in plain language style, that the parties to the contract, whether main contractor, subcontractor, subcontractor, supplier, or the client, and so on, can easily understand, as well as it being easily understood by dispute resolvers like Tricia, who is a lawyer, and an arbitrator, and a adjudicator, and a mediator, and a judge, and everyone else. Okay. Now the steps are: the first step, one of the early steps, is to have a white paper, which I'm writing now, which will include within it a set of plain legal drafting guidelines specifically for construction contracts, which I shared with earlier, and I'll repeat it shortly, with a view that if people are persuaded, they will make sure that future drafts of all contracts are written in language that complies with the suggested set of modern drafting guidelines, including, of course, this contract here, which you can or may not be able to see, is the PAM contract 2018. Okay. So I mentioned day one, we talked about contract formation. Day two, we talked about time clauses. And then day three, on Wednesday, yesterday, we spoke about all the issues relating to financials. And this is for tomorrow. We'll be talking about dispute resolution and reforms and so on. And I just want to say that I'll also, on tomorrow, the last day, I'll be talking a little bit about continuing education, because some of you seem to be asking, oh, if I want to do a master's and so on. So I'll share a little bit on some ideas about opportunities from the UK through to different countries, including in Malaysia and Australia, New Zealand, and there's one in Dubai. Okay, a master's program. There are only about 13 or 14 master's programs specialized in construction law in the world. So very limited, 7 in the UK. And today, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about performance under quality clauses and defects liability period and so on, health, safety, environmental, which I won't take long at all, subcontracting, very important area, and termination. So it's quite a lot to get through. But remember, I am supposed to deal with every question that you asked me yesterday, today. Day one questions, I dealt with in day two. Day two questions, I dealt with yesterday, day three. And day three questions, I'm going to deal with it shortly. Okay, before I deal with those questions, I just want to share with you the poll from day three, which was yesterday's poll. And I asked you the poll when throughout the course of the session, we discussed about forms and precedents. The reason why lawyers use sort of traditional style is because they're just taking from old contracts and they just modify it. And I asked the question whether an international version of the contract that we're using in this series should be drafted. That was my question. Should I attempt to write a set of plain language, universal model terms of a construction contract, meaning it can be used anywhere in the world, rather than one which I'm sharing this week, which is Malaysia-centric, okay? 91% said yes. I'll think about it, and I'll let you know if I do draft. And of course, I'll share it because you have registered. And I think that the organizers have got your details. They can email to you. But if you have a session on that, then that's something else, okay? And right, this is the contract that we are using as a base to discuss the construction contract principles. The reason for that is because the contract is in plain language. And when the contract is in plain language, we can focus on the principles rather than trying to understand the language, okay? And I mentioned this particular contract complies with all plain language drafting guidelines internationally. It complies with all of them, okay? Which is good. And here are an extract of just 17 plain language drafting principles internationally, which I felt are completely relevant to construction contracts, okay? Average words per sentence of about 20, gender neutral, active sentences, plain words over complex words, fewer syllables, null and void, for instance, and don't put the contractor must submit notice within 14 days, or like in this contract, right? 14 days, bracket 14 or whatever, or FOURTEN and so on. Don't draft like that. That's not good. That doesn't comply with more different legal drafting style. And of course, the words like whereas, said, and so on. Good drafting requires to list them down nicely, which is good. no multiple referencing, a logical structure, which I'll demonstrate in the next slide. Don't have to have unnecessary definition. Day, capital D, time, capital T. Hang on. Normally you wouldn't define time, but full of definitions. You don't need that. But it is important that we preserve legal terms of art, like practical completion, and so on. And avoid using words with multiple meanings. And I will be looking at termination clause today. The word determination has got multiple meanings to be avoided. Forget about Latin phrases, because Judge Mark Painter says Latin is a dead language and it should remain buried. And don't use those things called and, stroke, or, and, or. And of course, remember the golden rule of drafting: never change your language unless you wish to change your meaning, and always change your language if you wish to change your meaning. And then I mentioned that that particular contract that I'm using as a base for discussion of legal construction contract principles, I'm using the STCC RSP as a sample, and that it complies with all the plain language drafting principles. If you look at this cow at the bottom, notice the cow, it's got the various countries, right? The only country missing is New Zealand because the tail is in the way. But that's okay, we'll live with it. And this is a structure that I was proposing, that, sorry, not the only structure, a sample of a logical structure. All the time clauses together, all the money clauses together, all the quality clauses together, subcontracting, termination, dispute resolution. It's a bit like the BMW 7 series, just 7 broad categories of clauses within which are all the other clauses. I had quite a lot of questions from yesterday, and I had to refer to the PAN contract for some of the questions. And my goodness, of course, I'm quite familiar with the PAN contract because I used it for a good nearly 20 years when I was practicing in Malaysia. But I was looking for the payment clause, and I was looking, and I thought, what was that? Surely it must be in the beginning. And I forgot that it's actually well after everything else, even after termination. Termination is clause 26, and then payment is 30. Where's the logic? Please, I urge PAM to completely restructure this contract so that when someone new to it can easily pick up the structure, like this structure. So clause 30 should not be where payment is. It should be well before termination. Termination should be towards the end. Okay. Anyway, some of you asked about references and so on. At the end of the series, you will get access to all the 5-day sessions in a YouTube video, and the slides and so on, and a list of references. So don't worry about it. You will get it all after this week. We'll compile it all together. But anyway, I thought in case you're in a rush, here it is, one of it, Brian Garner's Modern Legal Dictionary Usage, which is about, in fact, I forgot to bring it from my office when we were in lockdown for the past 4 weeks or so. I didn't think I would need this, but anyway, I didn't need it. And of course, Peter Butt's book, which is the one book I would recommend for, especially if you're a lawyer, you want case references and so on. There are others. Judge Painter is a good readable one. Now, there's one more reference, which is just a paper that I wrote. It's about 40 or 60 pages or so. It's been referred to by someone in Australia as a magnum opus. It's not, but anyway, he said it's a magnum opus. Someone else called it a white paper. It's not quite, but anyway, it was a paper I wrote. The reason why I'm showing the whole screen is this. Look at the date of this paper. It's 2008. I wrote this paper in 2008, following a conference in Auckland in 2007. And up to today, everything is relevant. I just skimmed through it. It's all relevant. There are cases in it, there are references in it. But here we are 12 years later, and I'm saying the same thing. Gosh, which is why I need to really focus on Vision 2030. Just 10 more years, we got to have achieved this. Now, there's one more reference which I'm sharing with you for the first time in this series, and that is this, because today we're talking about subcontracts. There is a document called Model Terms of Construction Contract between a contractor and subcontractor for subcontract works, 2007. This was drafted in 2007.
It's 7:15.
Thank you. Published by the CIDB, Construction Industry Development Board. CICC, there's a Construction Industry Contracts Committee drafted it. And that link, you can actually Google it if you want. But don't worry, we'll give you the link. And at some point, Ziha, you can actually Google it for now, but we'll give you the references, okay? So that's relevant to today's session and for other sessions as well. And I just want to finish off a couple of slides before I move into the questions from yesterday, and that is a reminder. Professionals are expected to be altruistic. All professionals, architect, engineer, QS, lawyer, doctor, dentist, and so on. If you're a doctor and you're a gynae, you don't go and say, oh yeah, let's go for cesarean section just to make a bit of money. No, you don't. You do what's best for your client, what's in the best interest of your client, not your fees. Likewise, architect, likewise, a lawyer, and so on. Now, one of the requirements is that you're altruistic, putting the society's and client's interest before self-interest. Drafting contracts in plain language is putting the client's interest first, okay? So that's my urge. And finally, I just want to remind us why it is important that all contracts in future must be in plain language. It is going to be a commercial client's demand that they will refuse to pay for legal services unless they're plain. Clients in future will demand that they will not use a contract unless it's in language that they understand. They're going to refuse to use it, especially if there's an alternative. And of course, the coming of smart contracts is already here, but not so much in construction contracts. And when it's here, invariably contracts have to be in plain language before they can be coded into computer code and be made into smart contracts. Okay, right. And then finally, a reminder about my vision. I've just reminded you. I will now share the questions from yesterday, and I'll try and deal with it as quickly as I can. Let me just share that, and that's the document. No, it's not. That's not what I'm sharing. So I will share this Word document, and you should all be able to see this. Yes, it's showing that you can actually see this, right? Oh, okay, right. I'm going to run through it as quickly as I can because we've got a lot to cover today. We've got termination, we've got quality, and we've got subcontracting as well. But let's try. I said I want to address all the questions, and I will. Every question. There's a whole bunch of thank yous and la la la. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But let's deal with the actual questions. Nick asked, who introduced me yesterday, and he was in one of the series as well. You should listen to him talk. He's a funny chap. I mean, he's humorous. What I mean is he's humorous. Nick said, lots of people work in the construction industry are not necessarily academic. Some may have progressed from site into managerial. In other words, they came straight off high school or something. They're working in the industry. And Nick is saying he's worked with many who are brilliant, okay, but not necessarily brilliant in paperwork. So keeping contracts simple or in plain language is good. And he's saying basically plain language all the way. Yes, good stuff. Yeah, I agree. And Juita, my colleague at Massey University, says, I concur, Nick. Brilliant. The only thing is Juita is, she's a QS and a qualified project manager, and she's a PMP and everything else. And she's got a law degree as well. Oh, God. Well, okay. She's learning this new language called plain language. Remember, she's got a law degree, so she's working towards speaking in language that we speak. We're trying to get there. There was an observation about dressing down. Nothing really. Nobody needs to wear a shirt and a tie or whatever. The reason why I'm wearing this is a sign of respect to my audience, but you don't have to do that. But please try and put on a shirt if you can, because apparently yesterday there was someone who was sort of, I don't know what it was, half. Okay. And there was a question which someone asked for a link to the SCCC-RSP. That's the link that the tech moderator has put on. Mr. Tech Moderator, if you've got the link again, maybe you can put it on the chat function as well. And okay, here's the first question. Is there any data or statistics showing that contracting parties always argue over legalese or the terms found in traditional contracts in court? Wow. Now, definitely not 100, definitely not 500, definitely more than 1,000. Okay, yeah. So the answer is yes, more than 1,000. I don't know whether it's more than 10,000 or whatever, but certainly more than 1,000. All you have to do is look up under court cases. A big chunk of disputes are all about interpretation of words in a contract. So plenty. And then we've got one from Abhishek, who is a researcher at IIT in India. And now, for those of you who are not familiar, IIT, they've got various branches in India. They're the equivalent of the MIT or Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge in India. So he's doing some research. So look, if you have time, just copy that survey link and paste it on your laptop or whatever, and later on do the survey. Don't do it now, listen to me first. Okay. What happens if the contract period ends, but the contract document is not binded, well, not bound, I mean, okay? Yeah, kindly explain the consequences and effect. Okay, folks, this is an easy question. If the contract period has ended, the work has been done, contractor has been paid progressively, the answer is, what's the consequences? No consequences. Let me bring that to an extreme. A project to build a whole house or a building. The client, contractor, have got a contract, entirely oral. They've built it. They've been paid, or not paid even, partly not paid. Does it matter? No problem. It's legally binding. So there's no issue. So there's no consequences if the contract is not bound and signed and everything else, okay? However, please don't do that, especially when we've got nice and easy standard forms of contracts now, which are in plain language. Just go ahead and, even if you don't bind it, just I don't know, you can't staple it, maybe just put it together and just get it signed and get on with life. There's no reason not to, okay? Just one thing, if at some point you're going to go to court over those contract documents, then you may have to get it, certainly in Malaysia, you may have to get it stamped and so on. So yeah, at that point you can, but no consequences. Now, here's an interesting question. There are three questions here. Now, I say it's interesting because immediately when I read this question, now I appreciate why doing a structured degree, for instance, or a diploma, or maybe even a certificate, or of course a master's program or whatever, is worth doing. These three questions reflect it. Construction contracts can be formed on the basis of, let's classify them academically if you want, but it's also practically and also legally, okay? Legally. Contracts may be lump sum contracts. Lump sum contracts may be divided into 2 or 3 or 4 types. One is pure lump sum, based on drawings and specification, like in Malaysia, the PAM without quantities, like in the UK, JCT, those days, without quantities, or the local authorities without quantities, no bills of quantities, pure lump sum, based on drawings, specification. That's called a lump sum contract without quantities. Then, of course, you can have another type of contract called lump sum as well, because there's a fixed lump sum, I mean, it says the contract sum of so much, but with quantities, where quantities form part of the contract. A common example of that is JCT with quantities, okay, or any other contract where they have bills of quantities, or in New Zealand we call it schedule of quantities, or used to call it schedule of quantities. And of course, in Malaysia, the most commonly used private sector one is called the PAM with quantities. Now, when you have with quantities, and these by far are the most commonly used construction contracts, certainly in Malaysia, the without quantities are not so, well, it's still used, but the most common one is with quantities, according to PAM anyway. And now, who holds the risk for the quantities? Depends what on your contract says. Now, I have looked and searched for the clause in this PAM contract. Luckily, I found it. It's hidden away in clause 12. I'll read to you what it is. Unless otherwise expressly provided, the contract is a lump sum contract. Here is a lump sum, but with quantities contract. There you go. And then it says, any error in description, quantity, or omission of items in the contract bills shall not vitiate the contract, but shall be corrected by the architect or consultant. There you go. This particular contract, PAM 2018, which is in my hands now, says, who holds the risk for the quantities? The answer is, well, it says it should be corrected, which means the risk is being borne by the client. Okay, it will be remeasured and the contractor is not bearing it. The second one is lump sum contracts should not have quantities. Look, the categorization, lump sum with quantities, lump sum without quantities. Okay. Yes. Okay. If it doesn't have quantities, then you have schedule of rates. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a pure lump sum contract, or lump sum without quantities. Then you'll have a schedule of rates. Yep. Okay. And then let's carry on. Including quantities in lump sum just complicates things. Yeah, I know. Hey, look, many quantity surveyors are still churning out bills of quantities these days. So give them a bit of work to do. Anyway, 1 hour per day. Isn't this very short for this important course? Look, I appreciate this feedback. I'm serious. I know you've written there. I pay attention to it. I said I read every comment. I will give this feedback, and you can give this feedback to the organizers. But we already had 30 days, and this is already an add-on of 5 days. What more do you want? Anyway, I'll ask you that question at the end of the session. Okay. There was a question privately. If government changes in the state, then the newly formed government has the right to stop the work and can award to a new contractor by re-tendering. Let me get this clear. Let's look at it from a legal perspective. No, once a contract has been entered into between, say, government and a contractor, if the contract has already been formed, no government can change anything unless it is expressly provided in the contract that, oh, you can do a variation, you can, normally it would just be variation, or there might be a provision in the contract, we're talking about termination later, where you can terminate at will, suka-suka. Yeah, there can be such a clause in the contract. Termination at will, that's the normal terminology used amongst lawyers and everyone else, you know? And that is, the contract has provision in the termination clause which says the client, in this case, say government, can terminate the contractor's employment for, it could be breach, or it could be for, well, suka-suka. That means no reason, termination at will. It's perfectly possible. And that is increasingly being provided in many contracts. You know, for instance, a developer, let me just put my charger on just in case it goes down. And the switch. Okay, there you go. Now, so coming back then, it is perfectly possible for construction contracts to have a provision for termination at will. A developer, for instance, might have a termination at will clause where, for some reason, maybe they haven't sold enough houses and so on. They may want to end the contract. And you can expressly provide that. No worries. But if your contract does not have such a provision, no one between the parties to the contract can terminate the other. Okay? Because if you do, then that will be classified as a wrongful termination, which will entitle the contractor to sue you and recover for breach of contract, for damages, including loss on profit on work to be done for the rest of the project. Let's say $100 million. You've done $50 million. Of course, maybe you've been paid the remaining $50 million. If your profit margin is, say, 10 million, you don't have to do the work because they've terminated you, but you can recover that 10 million profit margin. You can do that. I've been an expert witness in court. Now, was it court? And then went to arbitration. So I won't mention the name. Actually, it was in court. So yeah, it was loss of profit. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The case name is not important. And I was an expert witness establishing how much the contractor's profit would have been had the client not wrongfully terminated and so on. Okay. So yeah, you can't just terminate. So yes, I know that when Mahathir came in, there was contracts with China and negotiated and all that. That's different. If the parties agree to renegotiate, that's something else. You can use a bit of a muscle, political influence, whatever. But that's something else. I'm talking about contractually. Now, yesterday, somebody mentioned about, because there was some reference to B40 as well. Not B40, it's called M40. I'm reliably informed by Amna, who is one of my former colleagues who's active in RISM and so on. She said, oh, no, it's, and she actually gave me the definition. You know, Malaysians are categorized into 3 different income groups. That's T20 is for the top 20, middle 40, and the bottom 40. Obviously, Nick is in the T20 category because we've all established that
it's 7:30.
He earns quite a lot of money. Okay, now, again, another question. Many government employees have habit of inserting special conditions and so on. And this can override this, the plain language ones. It's okay. look, you can have special conditions, you can have special terms now. It's okay, I've got no problems with it. Over time, as people get skilled in writing in plain language, all you have to do is just make sure that your special terms are written in plain language. That's all. Someone asked me, PAM 2018 does not provide for limit of retention fund anymore, since sorry, there's no limit. It's only a 5% deduction, and that's all. They're asking me for my opinion. Why not? You can agree anything you want in the contract. No worries. That's okay. So what? In fact, if the deduction is 5%, it's 5% all the way. If the deduction is 10%, 10% all the way. Or you can have a limit. So this is between the parties to the contract. Fine. The contractor will price it accordingly. So no issues. Okay. Now, there's a question about how do you decide what is a fair market rate? Because yesterday I referred to fair market rate. The answer is, in the first instance, the contract administrator will decide what is a fair market rate. That's it. Then I know you can argue, but under typical construction contracts, the engineer, the contract administrator, the architect will decide. That's it. If, as a contractor, you're not happy, you can always go to adjudication or arbitration or whatever at the end of the project, if your contract provides for that. Okay. If a disagreement on fair market rate agreed can varied work be paid based on contract administrator's recommended rate? Yes, the contract administrator will decide. It's not recommended rate. The contract administrator will decide what it is. Okay. If the contractor accepts the payment, can he oppose it later, or is he considered accepting it? He's silent about it. Now, I suggest, when it comes to negotiating rates, if you've signed your life away halfway through the project because you're progressively clearing a variation, well, if you disagree with a particular item, don't conclude that particular variation and so on. Right? If you're happy with it, sign your life away. Okay. Now, someone asked me, under NZS 391, New Zealand Standards 3910, if it's a measure and value contract, will the remeasured quantities be treated as a variation? Now, what I did was, rather than opening the 3910, I've just extracted the relevant clause here. And it says here, in a measure and value contract, the contract price calculated according to the measured quantities as determined by the engineer. That's what it says. It's not too bad in terms of the language stuff. And each item of work, you will use rates in the schedule prices, subject to adjustments provided for. So in other words, yes, so your question was, do you actually remeasure and treat it as a variation? There is an obsession in New Zealand over the definition of what is a variation, because everything is lumped as a variation. What I suggest we do is, if the contract provides for it to be adjusted, just adjust the value and apply the rates. Just follow it. If there is a provision, for instance, as a result of that, there has been delays and compensation is required under the variation clause as defined, then you claim for extra compensation. Okay? So, for instance, here, 234, it says, where the actual quantity of any single item differs from that to some extent makes it unreasonable, then the quantity shall be treated as a variation. In other words, if the quantity is not extraordinary, then no. But if it is, like exactly here. So the answer is in clause 234 of NZS 3910 2013. Privately, what a great vision of modern plain languages, supporting visual strongly. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Oh, okay. Someone said big yes. Okay. Now this was at about 4 o'clock Malaysian time and 8 o'clock here, just after 8. I did ask whether there should be a separate session, and some of you are giving lots of responses on that. We'll okay, yeah, another more of these sessions and so on. I don't know. I'm not the organizer. We'll have to ask the L2 brothers in the wider sense. Oh, why do I have some names here? I'm supposed to have deleted that, sorry. Under the all-in variation clause, may we freely claim delay costs, loss and expense, etc. Right. Yesterday, I said, or maybe this might be in a New Zealand context when you talk about variation, the answer in the context of the contract I referred to yesterday is this. If there is a variation, if there is a financial impact as decided by the contract administrator, then you get paid for the variation. And if there's an effect on your productivity and so on, and your progress of the works and so on, then loss and expense is claimable. I put that because Selamat Berpuasa means happy fasting, okay? Can you please share with us how to start to draft the plain language contract, any step-by-step guidance that we can do? Now, I haven't forgotten this question. I'll certainly keep that. I think we need a completely separate session. I don't know, maybe next week we can just look at a little bit of a session on how you draft step by step and how I have done it and so on. Okay, can you provide references? I've done that. Can we view back the last 2-day videos? Yes, all of it is provided. Contracts can be easily understood. Yep, that's all good. I will respond tomorrow. Oh, good question here. Someone asked me, wondering, how do you show the release of retention under clause 3.6 in the final payment certificate in the pro forma? Now, the answer is this. If you look at the pro forma for the payment certificate, there are there are 6 categories, 6 items. But when you look at the pro forma for the final payment certificate, there's one missing. So it doesn't say deducting retention, for instance. So it's just dropped off. So don't worry, automatically the work done. There's no deduction for retention. So that's it, the retention release, that's all. It's nice and easy. Now, one of you asked me about discussing with some friends overseas about plain language contracts. Now, of course, you can share the STCC with anyone in the world. Now, I want to offer one more thing. Anyone in the world, in different jurisdictions, if you are interested in coming up with your own plain language construction contracts, I'm happy to help you with the drafting. I don't mind that. And now let me just go back to, I don't mind doing that. All I would say is this. I don't expect to be paid because it's my hobby anyway. I can do it in my own time. But 2 things that I would require. 3 things. One is only if it's to be written in plain language. Otherwise, I've got no interest in drafting contracts. That's the first requirement. The second requirement is I'm in the academic line. So if I do such work, especially if I'm not paid, and since I won't be paid because I'm doing it in my own will, I would appreciate some acknowledgement, because in the academic world, it's publish or perish. So a lot of the things that I've been doing is an outcome of my research. So I need to demonstrate that the outcome of my research has got massive impact on industry. And the way, one of the impacts in that it's changing by 2030, the whole world will have construction contracts written in plain language. That's my target. And if we achieve that, I would have showed that my research shows evidence that it has impacted the whole world. The whole world, I do mean it, okay? Right, okay, now let's start with this. Is this big enough? I think it is, but if you want, I can make it slightly bigger. Maybe that's better. Yeah, okay. Today, we're looking at the quality and other obligations. Now, clause 411 is nothing really. It just says contractor must complete based on time provisions, on the quality provisions, all the safety, health, environment, and design, and so on. Design, if any, because if you use it as a design and build contract, of course you have to comply with the design requirements. That's it, okay? So nice and easy. Now here comes a nasty. The contractor must ensure and guarantee that all design, as well as the other stuff, construction works and materials and all that, are fit for the intended purpose. Look, getting the materials, workmanship, and so on, fitness for purpose obligation, no problem, you can guarantee it. But design, question mark. But the reason why it is fitness purpose, which is an extremely high standard, is the liability is absolute. No defense of, I did what any other reasonably contractor did. No defense. The liability is absolute. The reason why it is where it is, it's a policy decision, okay? I've noticed in the PAM contract, the most commonly used one in Malaysia, if the contractor produces a design, the obligation is fitness purpose. So remember, contractors in Malaysia, if you're asked to design any part, say no, and tell them, hey, look, this is not a designable contract. Don't ask me to design any of the finishes or the details and so on. Don't do it. Because if you do it, your obligation is absolute guarantee. You know what that means? There's no defense. Whereas The architect, under the consultancy contract with the client, the obligation for design is, you know what? Not fitness purpose, not absolute guarantee. It is reasonable skill and care. That is a normal professional standard. So why is it that the contractor must give a fitness of purpose for design? But don't do it. Don't design, because you're not qualified to, and you shouldn't. I know they might say, oh, but why did you do a bit of the detailing and all that? Don't do it, because this is a traditional contract, the PAM contract, that is, right? Likewise, if you're asked to design. But if it's a design-able contract, like the Public Works Department JKR contract in Malaysia, the obligation is fitness purpose for everything, including design. Then you just have to take up insurance for the whole thing on a fitness purpose basis. Good luck if you can find an insurance company that will give you insurance for fitness for purpose, absolute guarantee. Just quickly, I just want to do an analogy. No doctor will be able to guarantee their work. Okay, they can use reasonable skill and care, no problem, and they have a defense. I did what any other reasonably competent doctor would have done under the circumstances. We didn't have a cure for the COVID-19. So I'm sorry you died, but don't sue me, or rather next of kin, don't sue me, because I can't guarantee. But I exercise reasonable skill and care. I tried to get the ventilators. I put you on this. We monitored you with the nurses and everything day and night. But I'm sorry if you died. My defense is I did what any other reasonably competent doctor did under the circumstances. Okay? Now, fast forward a couple of years, if you've got a antidote, and someone is suffering or whatever, then that's different. But as it stands today, worldwide, there is no cure. Therefore, you just have to exercise reasonable skill. Okay, right, let's move on. Now, I actually mentioned this yesterday, but in case you're not here, and if you're new, or if you, just as a refresher, let's talk about this. Now, it says here, the contractor must rectify any breach immediately. Sure. So the default is that if you're asked to rectify, you rectify it immediately. Okay? But if you don't, the contract administrator can do one of the following. The first one is instruct the contractor in writing to rectify the breach, specifying the period for doing so. So if it's a breach, which will take 5 minutes to do, the contractor, the architect or contract administrator might instruct to say, dear Mr. Contractor, that breach, please rectify it by 5 o'clock today. Or if the breach is going to take 2 or 3 days to do, and there has to be a bit of materials audit, the contract administrator will instruct, please rectify it within 7 days, for instance. Do you get that? That is why it doesn't say exactly all breach must be done within 24 hours or 7 days or 8 days or 42 days or whatever. And let's do a bigger breach. Let's see. Right. The whole foundation has been wrongly set up. And because of that, the superstructure won't sustain it. Okay? It's not going to sustain it. So obviously you need quite a lot of money to spend. You won't remove the piles, you just leave it, but you'll have some redesign and additional parts in order to rectify the breach. So all that is not going to be done immediately. It might take a month because the piling rigs have been demobilized. So you have to demobilize, you have to design it and so on. So it might take a month. So the contract administrator specifies how long within which you're supposed to rectify. Okay, so, but having done that, having specified the period for doing so, if the contractor doesn't rectify the breach within 7 days after the period of rectification, in other words, after 30 days plus 7 days, then the contract administrator may get others to rectify the breach and deduct from the payment. Nice and easy. Similar to many other contracts around the world. The alternative is interesting. Instead of asking the contractor to rectify the breach, it says instruct the contractor in writing not to rectify the breach. Hey, don't rectify it. Then the contract administrator may then adjust the value of the works, taking into account the breach in payment certificates. They call it normally diminution in the value of the works. Why did I use the word diminution? The answer is this: adjustment is better. During the project for the construction court renovation project in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, inshallah, I can't remember which particular one. I think it was a Kuala Lumpur one. And what had happened is the light fittings that the contractor used wasn't according to the specification. But guess what? It was better than specified. Why did you do that? CIDB asked them. They were paying for it. They said, oh, because the end users, the court officials, had actually told them, oh, no, we want these fancy lights, which is from the other courts and all that. And the contractor just listened to them. Hey, but they're not the client and they're not the contract administrator. They shouldn't have listened. But anyway, they did it. So it was enhanced. So here is a situation where there is technically a breach. So the architect could have exercised this and adjusted the value of the works. In other words, paid them more, if you want to, or you can treat it as a variation as alternative. Okay, and here is you can continue to act on any breach by the contractor throughout the contract period, including the defects liability period, because there might be breaches even during the defect liability period. Now, health, safety, environment, all I want to say is this: the contractor must keep the site safe, clean, and all that jazz, and comply with all health, safety, and environmental laws and others required in the contract. So if in your contract you've got specific requirement under your ISO 9000 series or your ISO 25000 or whatever it is, you put it in the preliminary section, contractor will have to comply. That's it. My word. The whole clause on quality is on one page. Well, it's a bit less than one page. It's actually, let me see. Yeah, it's it is in one page. Okay, less than one page. It's about 3/4 of a page. Okay, let's move on to this critically important area of subcontracting. Why is it critically important? Because in the construction industry operates on a heavily subcontracted manner, anywhere in the world. Now, these subcontractors, by the way, in New Zealand, the Specialist Trade Contractors Organization doesn't like them being called subcontractors. They say, hey, call us specialist contractors. Okay, specialist contractors who are in a subcontract with a client, okay, with a contractor, sorry. So be careful with terminology. So who are they? They're specialist contractors who have got a subcontract between the contractor and the head contractors, we call it in New Zealand, and in Malaysia we call it main contractor, in UK we call it main contractor, and so on. So they are a subcontract. There's a subcontract with a specialist contractors. Okay, there you go. Let's get the terminology right. Okay, so it's critically important. There are two types. One is nominated, one is generally referred to as domestic. Domestic, nominated. Nominated means the subcontractor is selected or chosen by the client or the contract administrator, the architect, engineer, and so on. Domestic is where the contractor himself or herself chooses the subcontractor. That's what domestic means. It doesn't mean domestic meaning domestic in Malaysia means a domestic, meaning a Malaysian subcontractor or whatever. No, it doesn't. It means domestic means the main contractor, the head contractor, selects the subcontractor. That's what domestic and nominated difference are. Okay, let's carry on. This particular contract says you cannot wholly subcontract the works without the contract administrator's written consent. Fine, it's a very normal kind of a clause. You can't total sub, okay? The work, however, may be subcontracted for design. Why do you have that? Because if this is going to be used as a design in the contract, hey, you've already got the clause there. Because it's a contractor who's going to engage the architects, engineers for design. So it's already there. Okay, yeah, they're all subcontractors. Yeah, okay, good. For consultancy, like QS maybe, for supplies, for construction work, or labor. There you go. You can subcontract. What you cannot do is wholly subcontract. Total sub, no. Alibaba, no. Well, I don't mean Alibaba as in the Trade Me equivalent company in China. Alibaba is where you just have a namesake contractor and then they total sub the whole thing. Okay, so 512 makes it very clear. You can subcontract. Okay, they're all under that. Brilliant. Now, here is a critical thing. For your information, clause 513 was a clause where for not weeks, months, it was like trying to crack the code, because the whole concept of nominated subcontract causes a huge nightmare and has caused huge nightmares around the Commonwealth jurisdictions. The JCT, for the first time in, a few years ago now, They have finally cracked the code of problems associated with nominated subcontracts. They cracked the code a few years ago, before this was written. And the way they cracked the code is this. If you look at history, the number of court cases on nominated subcontract is a nightmare. There are books and books written on it. So they said, this is too much. We have to do something. How do we solve a problem like Maria with subcontracting, with nominated subcontracts? They cracked the code by suggesting, aha, we completely remove nominated processes at all. Completely. It's removed. There's no more in the JCT contract. Wow, that's an easy way, isn't it? Just get rid of it. Well, I didn't quite want to do that because I thought, is it possible to have your cake and eat it? Well, let's look at this clause now. The clause says, the work may be subcontracted through either or both. So you can have both. By identifying the scope of work separately in the contract documents, together with the names of suppliers or work contractors or whatever. So for instance, you could have the name of Anta Schindler and maybe Hitachi as a lift manufacturer, maybe just two, okay? You name them, Mr. Contractor, you can choose either one, fine, go ahead. Or you might have a list of plumbers. You can choose from any of them, fine. Because one is brother-in-law, one is sister-in-law, sorry, I don't mean that. I mean, sorry, one is a good plumber, well-known, and the other is well-reputable plumber. They're all registered with CIDB to do plumbing work. So you've already done all the verification, but you're providing a list of maybe 5. And then Mr. Contractor, you go and choose any of them and enter into a contract with them, and we're fine, we're cool. So basically that's what it says. The contractor must then select a subcontractor for each part of the works from the list. Okay, done, easy. So I've got a list, I'll give you, some call it named subcontractors, some might call it listing subcontractors. You can call it what you want, okay? We'll come back to the liability in a minute. And then it also says here, and must enter into terms of subcontract specified by the contract administrator. Oh, wow, okay. This sounds to me like nominated subcontracts, except that in this case, you don't have to. It's not the contract administrator doing the subcontract, nominated subcontract documents, tendering and all that. No. It's listing, you choose. Okay? It's a bit like marrying a girl. Okay, here are 5 girls. You can marry any of them, Mr. Main Contractor. Choose any of them. After that, you marry them. After that, you are responsible for them. Don't come back to Papa and say, oh, Papa, why did you choose this girl? It's your responsibility. You know, she hasn't got as much money as I thought she had. So you have to compensate me. I can't live now and I don't have money or whatever it is. No damages. Okay, we'll talk about the liability in a minute. So that's one way, listing. The second way is providing a fixed provisional sum of money within the total price. Now, that typically is called PC sum. In Malaysia, it's called PC sum, prime cost sum. Or you can call it provisional sum. It doesn't matter. It's a fixed lump of sum, which is included within the total price. And then it says there, following a subsequent selection of subcontractor for such work by the contract administrator. Oh, wow. Who selects? It's the contract administrator selecting it. That sounds to me very fishy, a bit like the nominated subcontracts. Yeah, that's right. Then it says contractor must then contract with the selected subcontractor on term, scope, work, and price specified by the contract administrator. In other words, that's a little bit like a nominated process anyway. Okay. Whereas here it does say if so instructed, meaning it may be possible that the contract administrator suggests you enter into a standard form of subcontract, or they might not. You know, and a standard form of subcontract could look like this, for instance, okay? The model term of a construction contract for subcontract works. Maybe, if they don't, you just use your own. Okay, so those are the 2 ways in which, or you can have a combination. And then finally, here is the obligation. Nice and easy, shocking. It's just 2 sentences. The contractor remains fully responsible for all work subcontracted, whichever way the subcontractor is procured. So whether it's A, or Roman 1 or Roman 2, the contractor is fully responsible. Okay, that's it. And not only that, as a reminder, it tells you that even if the contract administrator gives a written consent for the work to be wholly subcontracted, the contractor remains fully liable. There you go. All breaches by the subcontractor are treated as if they are breaches by the contractor. Done. There you go. There is, instead of using the deemed to be, which is a bit annoying, that's not plain English drafting, it says are treated as if they are breaches. Okay, that's the style. All contract And the contractor must cooperate with other contractors. Okay. Now, last part of it, termination. Now, I said earlier, you can have a provision in your contract for termination even at will. That means for no reason. Of course, the consequences of it, do you provide in the contract? Do you compensate the contractor? Do you pay the contractor for demobilizing? For getting out of sight, and do you pay for the work done? Of course, yeah. So here it's just a provision of how you have an express provision to terminate the contractor's employment. Okay. Note, what are you terminating? The contractor's employment. You're not terminating the contract itself. Okay, let's get this clear. You're terminating contractor's employment. Now, these are the reasons provided in this particular contract. Okay, you don't proceed the work in a regular and timely manner, or if you have stopped or suspended the work without valid reasons, or you don't comply with the contract minister's instruction, or you don't rectify a breach instructed to be rectified within the time provided. So then you can give the notice, and these are all procedural. This is the only clause which is heavily procedural. Okay. And then it says, if the contractor doesn't rectify the default within the period specified by the contract administrator, and then there's a default. If you don't say it within 7 days, okay, then the contractor may then terminate in writing the contractor's employment. Let's get this clear. What is being ended? Contractor's employment. What is being terminated? Contractor's employment. What is being determined? Contractor's employment. I use the word ended because that's how the New Zealand Institute of Architects contract drafts its contract. It's called ending the contract, for instance. What is the terminology used in JCT types of contracts? Historically, determination of the contractor's employment. What is the current terminology used in some of the contracts in Malaysia? Some use determination of the contractor's employment. Others use termination of the contractor's employment. Both mean the same thing. Because in law, the concept that they were focused on is terminating the employment, determining the employment, ending the employment. The issue is not about using the word determination, termination, or ending. The issue is about ending the employment, ending the termination. The IEM contract in Malaysia, for instance, used the word terminating the contractor's employment. JCT, I need to check the most recent version. I believe they do not use the word determination anymore. They say termination. Okay, there you go. The point here is, if you're determining or terminating or ending the contractor's employment, the contract is still existing. I repeat, if all you're terminating is the contractor's employment, the contract is still binding the parties. Then you follow all the rest of these procedures. If the client isn't paid, where is it? Procedures following termination. Okay. The contract administrator must issue instructions on plant material to be removed. The instructions must be issued within 7 days. The contractors must demobilize from the site within 3 days. And then client contractor must submit all claims. What does all this mean? There's a contract. You follow the procedures. This is not the same as terminating the contract. Because if it's terminating the contract, you say, go fly kites or whatever. I'm not going to listen to you. I see you in court or see you in arbitration. That is terminating the contract. So there is a difference in concept between terminating the contractor's employment or determining the contractor's employment or ending the contractor's employment as opposed to ending the contract or terminating the contract or determining the contract. Are we clear? So the contract, you must follow the procedures, and the procedures are laid out. Look, I don't want to talk about the details of the procedure. You can put whatever you want. Must what? Demobilize within 3 days from the contract administrator instruction. Doesn't matter. These are procedures. But please don't use terminology like within, let me just see if I can find one very quickly. Within 7 days, there must be plenty of that. Oh, I saw it. Oh, it's not stopping. Oh dear, I've zoomed too fast. Let me just go back. Yeah, there you go. Within 14 days, within a capital D. Wow, so you got to define a Gregorian calendar day and 10 days. This is all redundant. This is bad drafting. This is not plain language. Please, I would offer for Pam to redraft this whole contract in plain language. Because earlier today, Juita and I were speaking. She's a colleague at Massey University. She said, you know, it'd be
It's
nice
8
to
o'clock.
do research, her PhD in this sort of issues. And I say, why don't we redraft the whole PAM contract very quickly, maybe this year, talk to PAM, give them first out refusal, and then you can do research relating to whether, I don't know, some conceptual, you can come out with a research question or whatever. And she seemed to be really keen. She said I was very convincing yesterday. So Juwita, if you're listening to this, please think about this seriously. Let's redraft the PAM contract into entirely plain language. Give it to PAM. Ask them, would you like to have this, sir? If they say, no, we don't like it, then we just go to the architects and say, hey, look, here is PAM Baru. The whole thing conceptually the same as PAM Lama, but it's in plain language. And of course, the clause numbering will be rearranged and so on. Okay, so here is an offer for anyone to take it. And let's have a look. Right, okay. Now that's the end of the subcontracting, termination, and the quality clauses. Now, I was told it is now 8:01. I was told that I could have an extra 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever, but I'm not going to do that today because I know some we have to go off and so on. So go ahead. But what I want to share with you is this. I mentioned about the subcontract. Okay. Now, one of the things about subcontracts is this. This is a standard form of domestic subcontract. Okay. This was drafted. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Drafted in 2007. We had a 2006 edition, and then there was a little bit of a fine tuning that I did, and then we came up with this, okay, a 2007 version. It's published by CIDB, but it was written by a committee called CICC, Construction Industry Contracts Committee, okay? And it was written as a domestic subcontract, which means any main contract, you can use this as a subcontract. Are we clear? You can use it. If your main contract is JKR, Public Works Department, FIDIC, whatever it is, you can use this. But of course, a lot of it is in the context of a Malaysian environment, but from memory, and there was a drafting team that was involved. We've got lawyers there, we've got QSs, we've got architects, we've got engineers, we've got master builders, and it was endorsed by all those bodies. DBKL, Public Works Department, air conditioning and specialist contractors, fire, lives, master builders, Malay Contractors Association, architects, CIOB and electronics and IEM and Royal Institute of Surveyors Malaysia and so on. Okay, now this is a little dated. Okay, it's a little dated in that when we drafted this, we had three parts A, B, and C, which was quite unnecessary. If you look at the STCC, there's only part A and B. Whereas here we had the first part, which is a bit annoying. You know, it says this is a construction contract between contractor and subcontractor. The date is C1. Why do you have to keep referring to C1? Might as well just stick it all in as part A and be done with it. So a second edition is due. Here is my offer to all the 200 of you who are listening to this. If you are interested in a session looking at only subcontracts, it doesn't have to be all of you, just maybe a few of you, maybe 50 of you, whatever. I'm happy to have a session. Perhaps the first half an hour or maybe 45 minutes, we can have a session where we discuss about the contract, a domestic subcontract, which potentially can be used anywhere in the world as well. Okay, it'll be interesting. So I'm opening it to everyone. And the rest of the session, we have an open where everybody can talk and discuss ideas and ask me questions. Maybe 2 hours. First hour, we run through the contract conceptually. Second hour, we talk about open, you know, can this work in Mauritius? Can this work in Papua New Guinea? Can this work in Australia, New Zealand? Can this work with FIDIC? Can this work with a 3910 or whatever? So those kind of questions. So maybe a 2-hour session. I will be asking you to do a poll question today, whether you want such a session. And a question related to that is, do you want it over this weekend or next week someday? Do you want it over 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or whatever? Okay. Now, with that, I am going to do a new share back to the very, very last slide. And I am going to remind you of the vision first of all, because that's very, very important. All construction contracts in the world, we're looking at them being drafted or redrafted in plain language. That includes PAM, JKR, subcontracts around the world. That's my dream. And I'm now going to ask the tech moderator to share the poll so that we know directions as to what we do next. And with that, I wish you all a pleasant evening at, what is the time now? At 8:05 in the evening here, or rather, what time is it in Malaysia? 4:05. So please do respond to this quick poll. There are 3 quick questions. Would you like a specific session on plain language subcontract? Yes or no? If yes, when? This weekend or next week, weekday? And in fact, you could have chosen both, but it doesn't matter. If yes, how long should the session be? Whether it should be 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. And then all you have to do is just press submit. The tech moderator will be monitoring the poll results, and just answer those 3 quick questions. And we will see you tomorrow, which will be the grand finale of this series of the 5 structured program. And who knows, there might be a little bit of a VO, variation order. Variation orders can only be done with the consent of the organizers and me, and of course you, the audience. Okay, so thank you very much again. Stay safe and keep well, and remember to be kind to everyone. Mr. Tech Moderator, you may take over from now and play the music if you can. I can see clearly now. Everybody can see clearly now, all contracts.